if enough customers are grappling with the same issue, it's likely that that extends beyond that subset, right? If a big enough sample of our board has that issue, it's likely to be something a number of our customers are dealing with.
Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer, sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
Hey there! Welcome to episode 263 of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO of Ingresso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. My guest on this episode is Kelly Bousman, Senior Vice President of Marketing at AVI-SPL. Kelly, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thank you, Bernie. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited about our topic. We are going to talk about the voice of the customer and why it's so important to your strategy at AVI-SPL and how you go about harnessing the voice of the customer. But before we get into that, as you know, I've asked you to give my listener a brief introduction to your company, AVI-SPL, and of course, your role there as Senior Vice President of Marketing.
Oh, sure. Well, AVI-SPL is a digital workplace services provider who works with organizations globally to improve team collaboration and unlock new business value. We were founded in Tampa, Florida, and I've been with the company for almost 22 years, currently in the role of Senior Vice President of Marketing, which means I oversee everything we do for brand, demand, field, and customer marketing in all of the global regions where we operate.
Fantastic. Now, Kelly, didn't the company have a birthday this year?
It sure did. We turned 40. We had a 40th anniversary celebration for a good chunk of the summer.
Okay, so for anybody doing the math, the company was founded in 1979. Fantastic. All right, so let's get into the topic, the main topic, and that is the voice of the customer, the acronym. Of course, we have to have a 3-letter acronym for everything in marketing these days, Kelly. So the acronym is VOC. And so let's talk about what is the role of the voice of the customer in your strategy at AVI-SPL?
Well, for us, voice of the customer really informs all aspects of our marketing strategy, whether it's ensuring our brand is still relevant, how we go about user experience design, where we target our lead generation efforts, and even how we create customer advocates. So I think I mentioned we're a services provider and we're in the B2B space. So we don't really have the benefit of that closed loop buyer journey like we have with e-commerce. So we don't get to see how the customer became interested in us, the path that they follow when they're considering working with us, what their experience is like along the way, or even what that tipping point is for the customer, for them to become a customer. So gathering voice of the customer feedback is essential to us. It helps us really understand what motivated the customer, what challenges they're continuing to face as they work with us. It helps us to validate our purpose for them, align our offerings to their roadmaps, and it helps cast that light that a marketer needs to understand the buyer journey. And ultimately, it helps us find advocates.
I would imagine that it also helps you align with sales as well. The better you understand the customer, the better you can provide the sales team the tools and the enablement services that they need to engage with the customer.
Absolutely. It's through the voice of the customer feedback that we're getting most directly from our customer advisory board that I learn the most about the process they went through to become our customer and what their ongoing challenges are. So because of that, I can provide that loop back to sales, and I can also provide the information to our marketing team about what our current customers are really facing in the marketplace or in their own businesses. What are some of the business goals that they're trying to achieve, and how has our technology been an enabler or a roadblock for them? So that's truly the benefit, is aligning with sales and creating tools or messages or thought leadership that empowers our sales team.
Okay, terrific. So you mentioned the magic word, and that's the customer advisory board. I would imagine that it kind of means different things to different people within different organizations. So let's talk about, what is it, and how did you go about forming a customer advisory board at AVI-SPL?
Our customer advisory board is a formal organization. It has a membership with a term. It has a nomination process, an onboarding process, and a formal cadence of meetings. But it wasn't always that way for us. We started it because about 5 years ago, we started inviting customers to our annual global sales meeting. So every spring in Tampa, we bring in our sales organization from around the world. They kept asking, what other things can you tell us? We're actually in a relatively small market, coming from a legacy AV, moving into a burgeoning digital workplace market. Video conferencing even 5 years ago wasn't commonplace as it is today. So we started inviting our top customers to come to the event and do fireside chat style conversations with our CEO. And these were blue chip customers like Porsche and Boeing and MasterCard. And when they sat on stage and talked with our CEO in front of all of our sales organization, they were really sharing with us not only what had been key to the relationship, but what their future looking insights were, what some of their challenges that they saw on the road ahead, and how they hoped AVI-SPL would help. So when we saw those customers willing to share in that way, we thought, what if we did this with some regularity or some formality and with a real mission around it?
Interesting. Can you keep sort of unpacking that? Did you actually set out to form that advisory board sort of after that first or second experience? Did you have to do research? Did you have to sell it internally? What did that look like?
All of those things. So it was really those moments, the moments of seeing the willingness of our customers to share at that level. And then at those events, I was usually the one who was hosting the customers. So we would sit at the same tables together, and maybe the customer from Porsche and the customer from MasterCard would strike up a conversation, and we'd see that they were addressing similar challenges in their organization, even though their product or their service was dramatically different. So when we realized that there was something to having that open dialogue, something to having that peer networking, I started researching what would it be like to form an actual board to put this into practice. So I did what everyone does. I went to Google and I typed in best practices for customer advisory boards, and I did a lot of research. And I came across an advisory firm called Ignite Advisory Services, who publishes a lot of great guides on what are the keys to success in an advisory board. And ultimately, I ended up hiring them to be my consultant, not only because they have a track record of success, but because I wanted to bring kind of a third-party objectivity and facilitation to the board so that people may be more likely to speak in that open forum if they didn't feel like it was only AVI-SPL hosting them, if it was a proper approach or maybe a more formal approach with a facilitator. So after we hired Ignite, we worked on a charter. We came up with an internal nomination process. We conducted outreach with our executive sponsors to potential members. And now we have a board of 20 members. We host 4 meetings a year. 3 of them are video calls, and 1 is an in-person retreat.
So that's 20 members in the customer advisory board. Is that what you said, Kelly?
Yes, we have 20 members. It's actually kind of on the high side. right now, but we've had a lot of interest. And typically, these are busy executives in large global companies. So we don't have a 100% attendance rate at the meetings. People will drop in and out. So from my understanding, an ideal number is around 15, but typically we will have participation rates at about 15.
And you said 4 meetings per year. Are those physical in-person meetings? Are they video calls, which is something you know a little bit about at AVI-SPL?
So we have 4 all-hands meetings of the Customer Advisory Board. One is a 2-day retreat where we pick a nice location where we can be out of our offices and co-creating solutions or collectively problem-solving topics together. And the other 3 all-hands meetings are video calls. We keep those calls to about an hour. And even in those calls, as well as the in-person retreat, we are sure to adhere to the 80-20 rule, meaning our customers are offering and speaking and interacting 80% of the time, and 20% of the time, AVI-SPL is helping to stimulate that interaction.
You make it sound easy, Kelly, but nothing is easy, right? So what were some of the challenges you had in kind of getting it off the ground and really managing on an ongoing basis?
One of the biggest challenges is really coordinating it all. As I mentioned, our CAB members tend to be IT leaders in their own dynamic global organizations. So I would say from the time we thought of the idea, had executive buy-in internally, created our nomination list, it took another 3 months before we had enough members who had agreed to join the board and had done their onboarding interviews. So that coordination is really a commitment. I don't think I go a week without doing something related to our customer advisory board.
So you say it took about 3 months to just kind of get it off the ground. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
So it's off the ground and it's very active. It's a part of your strategy. So how are you harnessing the voice of the customer, the insights that you gain from the customer advisory board? How are you harnessing that in your strategy?
It goes back to that rule of listening, right? So after we onboard these members, part of that is creating a discussion guide when we onboard them to ask about some of their current initiatives or challenges related to digital workplace. So as we're onboarding members, we're listening for commonalities and we're listening for hot topics that are maybe particularly challenging at the moment or particularly hot or something that they think will be dramatic change in their organization. So as we're onboarding, we're listening for those patterns. And then we are creating topics that will be our follow-on meetings. So if the hottest topic coming out of onboarding was, I'll give you a recent topic, it was which UCC platform should I standardize on? Because
I'm sorry, Kelly, UCC, is that what you said?
Oh, I'm sorry, Unified Communications and Collaboration. Cisco is rebranding WebEx as Teams, and Microsoft has rolled out Teams. Both of those are platforms for video, voice, chat, presence, persistent note-taking, sharing of files, ways that teams can use online tools to collaborate. So when our customer advisory board were universally challenged with, do I choose Cisco or Microsoft, or how do I manage this? Because traditionally those tools had been separate in their toolbox, with Cisco being infrastructure and Microsoft being desktop. But as they're merging, that was a particularly challenging area for a lot of our customers. So we created that as a topic that we would address. And then because that topic was so hot, we created a subcommittee of members who were willing to meet monthly just to wrap their heads around, how will I make this decision? How will I create the business case for it? And how might I help my peers do the same thing? Because it's certainly not a decision of one product over the other is better. It all has to be understood in the context of the customer's organization. So we just finished a project with our members that really took a deep dive into the research and then took an understanding of the individual members' approaches to the topic. And then we created a tech paper that we will share with other members and publish through our channels about how other IT leaders could go about solving the same conundrum.
We'll be back in a moment with the rest of my conversation with Kelly Bousman. You know, at Vengresso, we run the Digital Selling Benchmark Assessment Report. It is an assessment for B2B salespeople to understand what their current state of digital selling skills are. We survey them with 10 multiple choice questions to understand where they are today with their digital selling prowess. Now, that survey is the foundation for our report called the State of Digital Selling with LinkedIn 2019 report. We summarize the findings from 862 sales reps, and we've got commentary from 15 executives. I want to invite you to download that report. Go to stateofdigitalselling.com. And we're getting ready to survey people for the 2020 version of the State of Digital Selling report. That'll be available early second quarter of 2020. But before you get ready for that, and you can participate in that if you like, stay tuned for more on that. Make sure that you get the 2019 State of Digital Selling report. Again, go to stateofdigitalselling.com to get that report now. So, Kelly, when you hear a topic like that, the UCC platforms as an example that you just shared, how do you know that the insights, the topics that you're hearing from the Customer Advisory Board are valid and useful and relevant and important and have the potential to kind of span the entire marketplace that you serve? How do you kind of pull out real and valid stuff versus maybe, one-offs?
That's a great question. And I think it happens in two ways. One, it comes from the voice of the customer. If enough customers are grappling with the same issue, it's likely that that extends beyond that subset, right? If a big enough sample of our board has that issue, it's likely to be something a number of our customers are dealing with. But beyond that, I look at analyst research. We're subscribers to Gartner and to Frost & Sullivan. So I'm looking at their research and I'm watching if the same articles and findings that they're publishing are addressing those same issues. And in fact, when we had the first meeting of our Customer Advisory Board committee on which UCC platform, I brought them some Gartner research, or I quoted some Gartner research because not all of them are Gartner subscribers. And I asked how many used Gartner to validate their business case. And they said, well, we don't use it to make the business case, but we use it to check if we're on the right track, right? To kind of validate, like, is this? So they're doing the same thing I'm doing. They're looking at that research and saying, are other people having the same challenge? How are other people addressing it? How will I apply that to my own organization? So we're looking at the marketplace as a whole. We're looking at leading indicators from analysts, and then we're discussing that with our customers.
Makes sense. Thank you for that. So I want to kind of speak to the listener who maybe doesn't have a customer advisory board in place right now. So since you've been doing it now for a while and you've got some really great experience that you're sharing with us here, what advice would you have to start a customer advisory board?
Well, I think you can look at your customer base and you can look at your business, and you'll probably notice that there are quite a few, or maybe it's a handful, but a number of them that have a significant impact on the way you're doing business, on the future growth of your company, or maybe they've given you actionable advice along the way that has had a positive impact. So you would identify who those customers are, and then you can think of the kinds of conversations you'd want to have with them. So for us as a digital workplace services provider, all of our conversations are around how are you inspiring teamwork, or how are you creating opportunities for collaboration in your organization with technology. So you would think of the customers who have impact on you, think of the kinds of conversations you'd like to have with them, approach them about wanting to more deeply understand their challenges, and then think of how you could wrap a theme or a mission around a board that would then provide your customers and you an opportunity for that kind of peer networking, that peer opportunity to address a problem like I just shared and come up with a collective solution you agree applies to all of you. And then once you have a group of customers who are willing and you have a mission that you would want to tackle, you can invite those members and you can even do video calls with them. You don't necessarily have to follow our pattern, but some level of frequency that is promised to them is a good way to start.
And really demonstrating the commitment and not this sort of it's an idea that we just thought of and so we want your feedback and then it never happens again. There's no consistency. There's no follow through. So it's really about demonstrating that consistency is what I'm hearing you say, right, Kelly?
Absolutely, Bernie. It really is. It's approaching it from, we understand that customers like you and your peers have some of the same challenges. We want to work with you to overcome those challenges, and here's how we can work together. We will focus on these topics. We will meet this often, and at the end of our meetings, we will share the notes so that everyone has some additional advice or information they can use to go back to their organizations and tackle these same problems.
So I want to ask you one more question before I segue to the summary and we begin to wrap things up. So what about the listener who maybe just isn't ready to commit to the formal customer advisory board? How can marketing leaders gain similar insights in the voice of the customer without really making that full investment in a formal, as you call it, CAB, customer advisory board?
There's a couple things you can do. Early on, I would invite myself to significant pitches that we were making to a customer to expand our work with them. So, for example, Amgen just moved to Tampa, moved a large part of their organization to Tampa, but before that, the largest part of that team was in Thousand Oaks, California. I was traveling with our executive team, and at the time that they were going to be going to Thousand Oaks, and I wanted to come along. I wanted to hear what that customer was saying, what their considerations were for working with us on such a major move to Tampa, and what had really tipped the scales for them, what would be important to them. So I've invited myself to meetings like that to hear voice of the customer firsthand and to maybe bring it back to the marketing team. Other things you can do are like hosting a roundtable. You could informally invite that same kind of group of like-minded customers or customers who are important to you that you think have similar challenges, invite them to a lunch or a dinner and promise it's all going to be around a certain topic that you know is important to them. Other things you can do is shift part of, if you have quarterly business meetings with customers, you could have a part of that meeting that is only always some forward-looking questions that are the same questions for every one of those customers, and then look for commonalities and patterns there.
So there's ways to do it without necessarily committing to the full customer advisory board. And maybe that's even the sort of the precursor to the CAB, as you say.
Those were our precursors. We did all of those things before forming the CAB.
Makes total sense. All right, Kelly, we're at a point in the episode where I'm going to do a brief recap of what we discussed, and then I'll ask you to elaborate on it. Feel free to just add fill in any holes or just anything you want to add, and then we'll ask you for your digital contact information, and we'll bring this episode to a wrap. We begin with a brief introduction to your company, AVI-SPL. You are a global digital workplace services provider. Celebrated your 40th birthday this year, the company that is, and you're working with teams globally to really help them improve how they collaborate so that they can unlock new business value. You are the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing there. You oversee brand, demand, field, and customer marketing. You've been there just a short while, about 22 years. And of course, we focused our entire discussion on the voice of the customer and how it really helps to inform all aspects of your marketing strategy. It helps you to continually validate your company purpose, the direction, your brand strategy, really help you inform your roadmap. And also helps you shed light on the buyer journey. You pointed out that, you don't always have insight into that buyer journey. So understanding the voice of the customer gives you that insight and also helps you understand input that you can give to the sales team so that they are better enabled in their engagement with the customer. In terms of forming the customer advisory board, you said that it is a formal organization. I think that's an important point. There's a nomination process. There's a cadence of meetings. You started 5 years ago, first by inviting key customers to join your CEO on stage at global sales meetings in a fireside chat style conversation. And you had brands like Porsche and Boeing and MasterCard there. And they really shared some compelling insights that really sort of lit the light bulb for you all to formalize it. You said, Kelly, that you embarked then on research on the best practices for a customer advisory board. You ended up finding and engaging an advisory service firm, Ignite Advisory Services, to help you really manage the whole process. And today you have 20 members in the customer advisory board. You're hosting 4 meetings per year. One is an all-day, or actually, I think you said a 2-day retreat, and the others are video calls. And I love the fact that you said you adhere to the 80-20 rule. So you're really doing a lot of listening so that you can really gain the valuable insights that you need. We talked a little bit about some of the challenges of managing the customer advisory board. And the biggest one you said is coordinating it all. The members are very busy. So it took about, you said 3 months to get it off the ground. And in terms of like how you harness the insights from the customer advisory board, you look for common themes so that you can really understand what your customers are dealing with. You gave the example of UCC platforms, which one to choose, Cisco or Microsoft. You said it became a hot topic. You formed subcommittees on it to really tackle that topic. And then we talked about how do you know that the insights you're gaining are valid and useful? And you said, if enough customers are dealing with an issue, then it's something that you want to tackle. You're going to complement it with analyst research, the Gartners, the Frost and Sullivans, to kind of validate your findings. And then, of course, discuss that with your customers and then bring that in internally to your planning. We talked about how do you start a customer advisory board. You said, well, start by identifying the customers who have a really significant impact on your business and begin to wrap some themes around the things that are important to them. Maybe create a plan around that and begin to invite members and onboard them through an interview process, identify the topics that you want to tackle together. But then we also talked about how do you gain similar insights without forming a formal customer advisory board, which is how you started. And you gave a few examples. You said you invited yourself to pitches that the executive team was making so that you can hear directly firsthand what the customer is saying. Then you can also do things like form roundtable discussions over something like lunch or dinner, and then really look for forward-looking and strategic direction topics that you're hearing even at quarterly business meetings. So it's not limited to things like a roundtable discussion. And these are ways that you can informally begin to gain insights in the voice of the customer before you actually kind of take the leap and commit to forming a formal customer advisory board. So Kelly, I'm going to leave my summaries there. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Wow, that was a great summary and wrap up. I think I'd like to formalize that as a how-to. I would think the one thing that is really important, that is part of the coordination that we do, is I do make sure that that feedback I'm getting from the customer is directly sent back to their account manager. So even though our account managers are not part of the board, they don't participate in the meetings, they're not invited to the retreat, it is really our executive leadership and the customers, I'm making sure that the account managers who are in the day-to-day operations with those customers understand what the board is talking about and understands what insights they've given us, what market drivers they've identified that might even change the way we operate, or even conversation starters that they could use with other customers to see if those same challenges are there. But one important thing is that even though I will give the direct feedback to the account managers whose customers are on our board, I never tell them which customer said what. And that's something we call the Chatham House rules. I guess that's called that elsewhere. But that means that that's part of how we create a culture of openness on the board. It's that their comments will be collected, but they will not be uniquely identifiable. So if I have an account manager who says, I want to know what my customer is talking about, I say, well, you know what everyone thinks is everyone on the board is having this challenge, or some people on the board are having this particular challenge. It kind of creates an openness where things can be aired, but there is no blame or there is no gap identification in a individual way, right? So one customer could say, boy, I'm really having trouble, getting this project off the ground right now. And that may or may not have anything to do with our organization, but I don't want the account manager to feel as if they need to go immediately address that with the customer. This is more of a safe environment for sharing and collectively problem solving.
That's a great point. I'm glad you made that point here in the wrap up. So, Kelly, I want to thank you so much for joining me here on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast to talk about the voice of the customer and how you formed and are managing so beautifully the Customer Advisory Board. Where would you like to send my listener online to connect with you and learn more about what you've got going on in your company, AVI-SPL?
Well, I think the best place is to find me on LinkedIn. You can look me up by my name, and I'm usually interacting with people there. And I'm happy to point you to some other articles we've published on LinkedIn that are results of our Customer Advisory Board committees.
Fantastic. My listener knows that your LinkedIn URL will be linked up in our show notes at vengresso.com. And of course, your website is AVI-SPL.com. Did I get that right?
Correct.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been a blast.
Oh, thank you, Bernie.
Hey, remember to get the 2019 version of the State of Digital Selling report. Just go to stateofdigitalselling.com.
This wraps up another inspiring episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you want to share this podcast with a friend, let them know that we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts. And we love 5-star reviews. If you are not subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. You can read the show notes for each episode at vengresso.com. While you're there, sign up to receive the show notes delivered to your inbox through our weekly alerts. And be sure to also check out our Selling with Social podcast hosted by Vengresso CEO Mario Martinez Jr. Again, you'll find our show notes at vengresso.com. And that's one S in Vengresso. Tune in again next week when Bernie Borges brings you another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.